everyone, welcome back to Novel Idea. My name is Dia, and today I have some autumnal, Anne's favorite word, autumnal book recommendations. Okay, so I'm not much of a spooky book reader, so most of these are not going to be in the spooky category. So I'm limiting this list to just fiction. Let's get started. So the first one is The Canterville Ghost, and this is by Oscar Wilde, and it's very short. It is funny as well as a little spooky. It's just right. It has a lovely outcome. So I'll just tell you right now, there's nothing to be afraid of. The next one that I have is T. Kingfisher's What Moves the Dead. And this is a reimagining of Edgar Allan Poe's The House of Usher. And it is so well done, I think. It is a little more fantastical and a little more almost science fiction-ish than what House of Usher is, but it still has that very Poe atmosphere, very much the same feeling of that Gothic literature that you get with House of Usher. Next, I have the one book that I own, and I actually just picked it up, and that is The Historian. Now this is a very chunky book, 700 pages. This is the history of the origin of Dracula, basically, told in novel form. It's probably my personal favorite historical fiction. We are following a professor whose mentor is involved in this history and whose daughter gets involved in the history, and just the way that they kind of go about bringing things to light and settling things once and for all. And it's just fabulous. It may sound boring, but there is not a boring moment in this book, at least not to me. This is by Elizabeth Kostova, sorry. I always want to put an extra syllable in there for some reason, Kostova. Then I have Susan Cooper's Undersea, is that right? Undersea Over Stone. And it is the first book in a series called The Dark is Rising. Oversea Understone, I don't remember which way that is. Just the right amount of eerie, the right amount of tension, and I loved it. Another one that is a kid's book is The Children of Rookskill Castle. And you can tell by the cover of this that it is definitely spooky. It is about a trio of siblings who are sent away during the war to a school in Scotland that happens to be a disused castle. All of the spookiness that ensues as a result of something underhanded that is going on. It's excellent also. And then lastly, The Girl with Ghost Eyes. This is not a children's book, by the way. This is an adult one. And it is about a girl whose family has the ability to speak with the dead, but they don't necessarily have the ability to see the dead. And this is her story about the fact that she can do both and just kind of what she is able to do as a result of it. And this to me, is probably the most spooky book on this list, but it is also probably my favorite spooky book I've ever read. So there you go. All right, let's move on to cozy mysteries. Autumn and winter seem to be just right for cozy mysteries. So the first one that I will tell you about is Single Malt Murder. Single Malt Murder is about a photographer who inherits a Scottish distillery, whiskey distillery, or Scotch distillery, and she knows nothing about making whiskey, and she has to basically learn from the ground up. And in the process of it all, she finds out that it's really not women welcoming as far as being the head of a distillery goes. And it's typical of cozy mysteries in the fact that there are animals that are part of it, and they are wonderful. The heroine of our story is absolutely wonderful as well. She's snarky, and she's just a strong, independent woman. And then there's kind of a Jamie Fraser type love interest in it. But I just really enjoy it, especially this first one. It's really good. And then there is The Stitching Hour, and it is based around embroidery and crewel work. It also has an animal companion. That one and Blackwork both are based around types of crafty needlework type stuff, and both of them are excellent. Salt and Pepper is about a spice shop in Pike's Place Market, and this one in particular is set in autumn, brings in all the coziness, and it talks about tea, and it talks about different spices, and they always have little recipes, and they're always trying out new spice blends. So that one is lovely as well. And then one that you might try, kid mysteries, is Unac Crate. And this is by Sean somebody. Unac Crate is the daughter of, or the granddaughter of, a wizard, and lives in the wizard's realm, between the human realm and the elven realm. And this is basically mysteries and adventures that she gets up to. And I think that there are 3 books in the series. It also has a wonderful animal companion in it, although he would not appreciate it if I called him that. On to fantasy. So the first one that I will tell you about is Courtney Reed's favorite book of all time, excellent autumn read. So it is about the Kelpie Scottish myth, horses that rise from the sea and are not kind. But this happens to be about the races that this one little island takes place in every single year, and about one family and another boy who have to kind of find their way in life due to being parentless, and just the way that they come together with this community, with each other, with their horses, and it's a good time. More on the YA side, but you're not going to get a bunch of the angst that you get with YA books. Sticking YA here, although again, you're not going to get the angst. And that is The Princess and the Goblin by George MacDonald and The Princess and Curdie by George MacDonald. George MacDonald is just masterful in the way that he lets almost an allegorical type of story feel like it's standing on its own 2 feet, like it's not allegory. And yet you still can pull little things out of it if you want to. You can kind of guess what they're about just from the titles of them, but they are beautiful. It feels very much autumnal to me. There's that word again, Anne. The Arcadians. This is by Lloyd Alexander. This is a standalone. And this goes through several seasons. I do believe it starts out in summer, but it goes through other seasons. And the fact that they are on an adventure, that they are on a sort of quest, and that they are forming friendships and finding community and all of that, this is absolutely fabulous, and I would highly recommend it. And then The Neverending Story is an excellent one. It is about a boy who is going through some grieving, and the way that a book and a story helps him through that process. It's a very special book, and that book is what kind of helps him to move on with life, and it's wonderful. And then older YA, The Thief, which is said to be a middle grade, and I think the initial age of the protagonist in this story is quite young, but it's just got some graphic sort of violence in it. It feels perfect again because of this kind of adventure, and it does have some things in it that just feel very much like it's the perfect beginning to autumn. Sorcery of Thorns and An Enchantment of Ravens. I personally love A Sorcery of Thorns more, about a girl who is brought up in a very special kind of library. Some events that happen that she shouldn't be caught up in, but she is, and it's very fun. There's a little bit of romance in it. The romantic interest is more of the YA than the girl is, which is part of the reason why I like it so much. An Enchantment of Ravens is more of your fairy fae story, and it is about the fact that the fae cannot create. They are not a creative species, and they have to rely on humanity for that, and yet they really despise humanity. And so the only way to stay safe with the fae is to create things that they find beautiful and to continue to intrigue them. 10,000 Doors of January. This one is about a young girl and her father who live with a benefactor, and that benefactor takes care of January, is her name, and he takes care of her because her father is his employee who goes out and does these missions for him. And in order to be able to do those missions, he has to know that his daughter is being taken care of. And there are some kind of rugs that are pulled out from underneath you while you're reading, and there are some really heart-pounding moments in here, and then there's some very endearing and exciting and sweet moments in this as well. The Ember Blade, which reminds me a lot of whichever one is the first one in the Lord of the Rings series. Fellowship of the Ring is what it reminds me of. So Ember Blade is about a young boy whose father is accused of something, and he has to kind of set out on this quest to right a wrong, and it is about the people who join him along the way, setting out again on a quest, on an adventure, which always just makes me feel like it should be an autumn book. Race the Sands by Sarah Beth Durst. Very unique, I think, in its whole premise. These races that happen with these certain beasts that are supposed to be reincarnations of people who haven't led a good life. And so there are these reincarnations. They come back as this beast that is a conglomeration of several different sides of their personalities. And the races that take place on these beasts are very dangerous. And then we have an all-female protagonist cast. And the reason why they're doing things and what comes about as them being willing to join forces is it's just so good. Then I have Tooth and Claw, and this is by Jo Walton, and it is literally Victorian dragons who speak and have jewels that do certain things for them. And it's just so interesting to have it set in this way and in this manner. I think there's a blurb on the cover that says something like Pride and Prejudice with dragons, which I can see a little bit, but I wouldn't go into it with that mindset. I would go into it thinking that these are Victorian era dragons that are doing things in a very dragon manner, but doing it according to Victorian era sensibilities. It's so fun, you guys. The Daughters of Temperance Hobbs is a little bit of a witchy story. It's a lot of a witchy story. It is about this book that has been passed down through generations, and the way that this has affected each generation, and what this particular generation that the book is set in, what that generation needs to do in order to make sure that these other things don't continue to happen. It's a really poor explanation, but it is such a good story. A discovery of witches, because it too is end of summer, beginning of the school year. It has witches, vampires, and demons / goblins. They would be goblins in other stories, but in this story they're called demons. The story is very similar to Temperance Hobbs, similar to that in the fact that there is a book, and it's affecting things, and they need to find out why, and there's only one particular witch that can do it, and how that affects the races around her. And so both of those, I would say, are really great reads for going into spooky season. Nettle and Bone, also a T. Kingfisher book. This is more of a slightly intense fairy tale. And if you have read Brothers Grimm, or you have read, the Charles Perrault, some of those fairy tales, this is in keeping with them. I think it's very, very similar, but it's a completely new story, modern take on old fairy tales. It's about sisters, it's about sisterhood, it's about family and finding your place and being your own person still. And it's got the cutest animal companion. The House Between Tides is a historical fiction. So it's not like we're jumping back and forth between narrators. It's all the same narration. It's just that things in the past are being very pictured. So it's about a girl who comes to, I think, the coast of Scotland and has permission to unearth this burial mound that is on private property, and just kind of what ensues as a result of that, and what she finds out about herself also in conjunction with it. The Lost Queen by Signe Pike is a story that is Arthurian in nature, but Arthur is not a part of it. It's actually pre-Arthur, pre-Pendragon, all of that. It's before a kingdom was set up. And it is about a set of twins. Perfect time of year, again, to read it. It takes place right at the kind of onset of that crisp fall season. Two more. Lady Trent. I cannot remember the name of the first book, and I can't believe I'm forgetting this. Very much a journalistic style of book, and she wants to be a scientist. It's kind of alternate world Victorian England, where there are dragons that exist. A Natural History of Dragons. That's the first book. But there's nothing magical about them. So don't go into it thinking high fantasy. Go into it thinking alternate history, slightly in the tone of a Jane Austen or something like that. But this is journalistic. So she's writing a journal, how she is going to go about getting her way to be able to become a scientist who studies dragons. They are wonderful. They are absolutely wonderful. And she's another one who is just a little bit snarky and fun. And then lastly, in the fantasy category, we have The Crown's Game. And this one is about a girl who doesn't realize that she is as magically gifted as she is. And there's only supposed to be one magical being in all of this world that we are in. And that person is supposed to serve the crown. Come to find out, there actually is another person. And in order to whittle it down to just the one, they have to participate in the Crown's Game. And it's excellent. We're gonna move on to classics. So first one would be Little Lord Fauntleroy. This is by Frances Hodgson Burnett. It is about a young boy whose father married an American, lived in America. He dies, but he has a son. His son has to move to England with his American mother and become a lord with a grandfather who is bitter and not kind to his mother, and just what his own sense of being as a young man who has been raised in a very loving atmosphere is able to accomplish in that elderly man's life especially, but also in the lives of those that he is going to be lord over. Cricket in Times Square is another one that I just feel is so perfect for autumn. It starts out at the very tail end of summer, and it is about a cricket who ends up leaving the countryside quite by accident, and a little boy who finds him in Times Square takes it as a good luck event that he has found, and just what this cricket is able to do for him, and along with his two friends, which are a cat and a mouse, and his quest to get back to the countryside. The Borrowers. Mary Norton has to have been one of my favorite authors as a kid. It's about tiny people who inhabit our houses quite unbeknownst to us until one day a little boy finds out, and just kind of the beauty that can come through acceptance and what happens as a result of letting yourself be known. Sign of the Beaver. This is by Elizabeth George Spear. And this is the story of a boy and his family who are moving westward in the United States, and some things that happen leave him alone in the woods, having to survive, and the Indians that befriend him and help him and teach him. Children of the Green No by L.M. Boston, or Lucy Boston, are a series of books about a young man, a young boy, who is going to meet his great-grandmother for the very first time in their ancestral home that he has never been to. His mother has passed, his father and his stepmother live far away in India, and he has been at boarding school. And his grandmother requests that he come spend time with her, and so he does. And it's just the most wonderful story of the generations finding each other to be comfort, finding each other to be family, finding each other to be human, and that they were young once as well. Has a little bit of a spooky quality to it. It does have something that would lend itself to spookiness, we'll put it that way. I just love this series, and I don't hear a lot of people talking about it. And then one that is very, very cozy and very good for the young is Hartwood Hotel. And this is a true home, and this is literally about this little mouse who finds a true home at the Hartwood Hotel, and about all of the other creatures that inhabit it. And it takes place, you can see, it's very fall, very autumn. An Old-Fashioned Girl. This is by Louisa May Alcott. One of the things that I set out to do in this video was to make sure that I didn't recommend anything that most people are recommending, or that is on a lot of other recommendations lists. And so I didn't want to put Little Women in here, because Little Women and Joe's Boys are on all of those kinds of lists. An Old-Fashioned Girl is about Polly, who is on the outside of everything. But she doesn't know that until she goes to visit some family. And she realizes just how old-fashioned, how removed she is from everything that seems so important to other people is just not important to her. And instead of changing her, she ends up changing others. And it's really, really lovely. I loved this story. Silas Marner is another one that I consider on the young adult side. Even though it's a classic, it's not young adult technically, but many of the characters in here are going to be in the late teens, early 20s. Our main character, Silas, is not, but there are many, many others in here, and you will get some angst from those characters. This is about a man who has been accused of something, and he leaves the town that he has been a part of and moves far away, and he is a weaver, and he moves basically to the outskirts of some place where he is completely unknown. And then one day he finds something that changes his life. And I'm not going to tell you more than that, because I think this is one that you really should go into a little bit blind. It's slow. You have to like slow. It's Daddy Longlegs. This is about an orphan girl who has aged out of the orphanage, and she is either going to have to work for the orphanage or possibly run away or something so that she can continue to live. And one of the benefactors of the orphanage becomes her benefactor individually and sends her to college. And his one request is that she write him a letter every single week about what is happening in college, what her grades are, how she's enjoying her classes. He never writes back, and there's a plot twist to this one. It's all in letters. So this is one of the only books that is completely in letters that I really love. And it's a school setting, and so again, perfect for this time of year. Another one that does have letters, but it is not completely letters, and I just read it a couple years ago and I just love it, and that is The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. Anne Bronte, who is not quite as well known as her sisters, but I think she's probably my favorite. I can highly recommend for this time of year because it is about, in many ways, it's about making a home and cocooning and finding what makes you truly happy in life. And it's just lovely. It's a lovely story. It wouldn't be a recommendation video from Dia without a Ray Bradbury. This is my favorite Ray Bradbury, and I do reread it quite often. Dandelion Wine. Perfect for end of summer, beginning of the school year. Summer is wrapping up in this one, and we are getting to see just the boyish childhood, the wonders, the frustrations, the anticipations, and it's just so good. Ray Bradbury, although weird in many stories, these ones are a little less weird, but in many stories, though weird, he is so wholesome. And that's one of the reasons why I love him. This is one I am currently reading. And it's perfect for this time of year too. And this is Lark Rise to Candleford. This is 3 novels. This is a bind up of all 3 novels in one. And right now I'm just reading Lark Rise, and it is so good. It's about her childhood in this hamlet of poor houses, poor people that could care less about being poor. For the most part, they are just living and loving and growing and caring, and it is just a wonderful, wonderful story. So if you like those kinds of family, cottagey kind of stories, this would be a good one for you for this season. Last one of my all-time favorite classics, and that is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. And this is about a girl whose parents have died. She is left to an aunt who is cruel. Her cousins are cruel. She is sent away to a school where more cruelty persists, and yet she has the most beautiful heart, the kindest spirit, and it is about overcoming all of life's cruelties that are perpetrated upon you in so many different ways, and they continue on into her adulthood, and she still overcomes and forgives and moves forward and loves fully, and it's just beautiful. I love this story. That's it. That's all I got for you. I hope that you found something in here that interests you, that you think would be a wonderful read, either this autumn or next autumn or whenever. And thank you again for joining me today. Appreciate it. Like if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to.